Hi, Mickey.
Hey, Bob.
How you doing?
I'm okay. I'm making the awkward transition from Newsweek to the Daily Caller, which I like. And I've been enjoying making fun of Newsweek, and I think their check cleared, so I think it's Katie bar the door from now on.
Now you can make real fun of Newsweek and the Daily Beast.
And John Alter's leaving, which is...
I didn't know that. Where's he going?
I don't know. It was just announced yesterday. It was also announced that the owner of Newsweek, one of the co-owners, Sidney Harmon, died at the age of 92, but he was still a vigorous guy. I actually had some encounter with him. You know, I wrote my senior thesis on job enrichment experiments in college.
I didn't know that,
and which was attempts to give workers on the shop floor more authority, make their jobs less alienating and also get more productivity. And it turns out those things work. It sort of was an early precursor of the devolution of authority to the shop floor that computers brought. And Sidney
we should try that at Bloggingheads. I'm going to try that with the workers at Bloggingheads. But go ahead.
Sidney Harmon was the pioneer of those things in several of his companies.
We should say that he's known for this stereo equipment, right? That's how he made his money.
Well, he sort of invented the modern hi-fi sort of box set, as it were, that everybody had in the 60s. They all had KLH and Harman Kardon stereos.
I remember it well.
And they were good. And but then he also had a bunch of other industries. I think he made auto rearview mirrors, and he made a whole bunch of things. And the problem with job enrichment, even though it makes workers are happier and they're more productive, is you need. This is what I decided in my trenchant Marxism of my undergraduate days. You needed an ever-expanding company, otherwise the workers, as they got more efficient, would work themselves out of a job. So a shop that needed 10 people before now only needed 8. What do you do with the other 2 people? You have to have a place for them to go in your expanding empire. And if it's not a growing company, the whole thing dies when the workers realizing, hey, we're just working ourselves out of a job. And I ran into Harmon like 30 years later and said, I did my thesis on your thing. And he said, oh, yeah, that only works if you have an expanding company. So he was sort of a no BS character who cut right to the chase. And I admired him for that and for doing the experiments and inventing all the stereos of my youth.
Don't you have anything snarky you want to say about him?
I don't have anything snarky to say about him, except that he didn't fail to find an editor for Newsweek, and as a result was forced to merge with the Daily Beast, which seemed like a good idea at the time, and until they sacked me, and then all of a sudden it seemed like a much worse idea. And it's actually turning into a huge disaster. I mean, Newsweek has 6 ad pages this issue, apparently, which is okay if you're just starting up, but if you're Tina Brown and your whole point was that Madison Avenue trusted you to make a glamorous product and they were going to invest in you, and right off the bat you were going to get a whole bunch of ads, that's pretty bad. I think she made the mistake of sort of having a slow launch where she was sort of locked into this ridiculous women's conference, so she had to make her official launch back then, and she wasn't really ready with her all the changes she wants to make in her magazine. But Madison Avenue took a look at those first 2 issues and said, this isn't very good. It would have been much better if she just waited 4 months, bled the owners for a little more, and launched with a big bang once she had all her changes in place. You just hear that it's like a low-energy place, that there's less there than meets the eye.
Actually, I was there. It's a high-energy place, full of youthful vigor. I felt very old and tired when I was there.
Okay.
But I was there only a couple of weeks ago. But you know what? You were fading in and out. In fact, for a while I lost you and started doing a little monologue, but it turns out you were talking all the time when you came back online. So I'm starting to think maybe I should switch phones, but maybe not. Let's try it one more time. Well, I mean, let's keep going and sustain the momentum we've built up.
Okay.
And hope for the best. So,
okay, I'm assuming that my audio is recording, and it was just you couldn't hear it.
I think it was a phone reception problem. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, so that happened, which sort of makes it harder to snark at them, but...
Yeah. No, I don't think it'll take you long to recover your snark. I'm guessing 24 to 36 hours. And I noticed you got an anti-Newsweek item in just under the wire right before he died. So that'll hold your readers for a few days.
Well, it was unfortunate that I wrote this snarky item and then found out that he died. It happens a lot, apparently.
Yeah. Hey, Mickey, I am going to call you back on another phone, okay? So did you entertain me while I was gone?
No, I didn't. Should I have?
Yeah, we'll want to go back and...
I think they're going to have to cut it.
Edit in some juggling or something. I'm
sorry, I didn't realize I was supposed to do a song and dance.
Yeah, you were supposed to say witty things.
Okay. Next time, it'll be incredible.
We can make up for it in the rest of the dialogue. Got anything witty you want to say about Libya?
Yeah, how's your humanitarian intervention going, Bob?
It was never my humanitarian...
saw the debate. I saw the dialogue with Ann Althouse. You were defending it.
Not as humanitarian intervention, though.
Oh,
actually, with the Althouse debate, the only argument I made in the Althouse thing was she asked the question, how is this different from Iraq? If you look at what I actually said, everything was in the context of that question. It's different from the Iraq intervention in a billion ways. But if you ask how would I defend it, it would not be primarily as a humanitarian intervention, which is something I guess I made clear in a Matt Welch dialogue, which I am now given to understand you did not listen to, Mickey?
No, I just saw you, in a world-weary way, defend the Obama administration's actions on Libya against Ann Althouse as if every child knew that Obama had a perfectly good justification. And now you're changing your tune and saying it is justified on other grounds?
No, I have been ambivalently defending it ever since it started. I'm not back. That was my position, a supportive position, but it was not. The humanitarian stakes alone, I don't think, justified it.
What stakes justified it?
I think they were one consideration, but I think it was also relevant that, in the context of the Arab revolts, you did not want to send the message, this was my thinking at the time anyway, that any dictator could evade the will of the people by killing a few hundred or a few thousand of them. In this case, it probably would have been a few thousand if we hadn't intervened. That was anyway. It was more along those lines that I was justifying it. It's turned out to be, a little messier than I had hoped. Although I really don't think. I guess I can imagine a partition outcome that I think would still vindicate the decision to intervene. If half of Libya becomes, in fairly short order, something that is the envy of the other half of Libya, that's probably better than not intervening. I think the big mistake, which I criticized from the beginning, was Obama kind of demanding that Gaddafi leave power. Even if that's your goal, I think it's stupid to say it. And I think that's what could make this look like a defeat. That's what could make partition look like a defeat.
But I'm all for multilateral intervention, but be honest, this intervention is now making the case against multilateral intervention. There's a plausible argument, which I regret to say, is plausible, because we had to go through the mechanics of getting everybody on board, we were too late. It would have been much better to stop Gaddafi's troops outside of Tripoli rather than outside of Benghazi. Second, it turns out the force that the international community can muster is too little. We're not stopping Gaddafi. He's still pressing on a couple of cities. And three, there's this whole area of obfuscation and BS, so we can't. Because the UN resolution says we're not deposing Gaddafi, we can't say it, yet we tell everybody off the record that's really our goal. So we're failing to achieve the goal that we see as our goal, of course, that we can't admit publicly. So those are three knocks against multilateralism that wouldn't exist if there were unilateralism.
You may have to remind me of some of the three by the time we get through with this. But as for the first...
Too little, too late, obfuscatory ends.
As for the first, would I rather have had, it probably would have been more effective if earlier, would I rather have it been unilateral and without the sanction of the United Nations and earlier? No, because I think it's sufficiently important that it be validated by international law that, no, I wouldn't take that trade.
But the innovation has demonstrated the real costs of that approach. That's the problem.
Life is full of trade-offs, Mickey, and this is one of them. You know, acting lawfully often takes time. You know, if you know that someone in the house next to you is dealing drugs, maybe it would be nice if the police didn't need a warrant. They could get there faster. But we agree that lawfulness has certain virtues, and the rule of law has certain virtues. And I think they extend to the international arena. So, yeah, life's full of trade-offs.
In this case, it's the difference between winning a war and losing a war.
So you think, well, no, I don't think it is, first of all. I mean, two things. The fact is that after the intervention that you think took way too long to get going, we got to a point where they were pushed back nearly to Tripoli. Then we started encountering a problem that I think we would have encountered in any event with this type of intervention that's an air power only intervention, which is that Gaddafi's troops found a way to operate using something other than conspicuous tanks, okay? And that's why they rolled back the rebel gains. You were probably going to run into that problem in any event.
I think they're using tanks in many cities. We're just
the tanks that are already in the cities, but what they wound up doing to regain the territory they had lost against the rebels was using exactly the kinds of pickup trucks the rebels were using to move from city to city. And so, and that's why you've had these mistaken, the friendly fire incidents, because all the vehicles look alike now. And so, in fact, the last tanks we killed, were friendly fire. It turned out they belonged to the rebels.
Since you anticipated that problem, isn't that a problem that Obama should have anticipated before he started the whole thing?
Well, I mean, maybe. It's turned out to be complicated. I still think partition could be better than having done nothing. But it's a very tough call. And like I said, I've always been ambivalent.
And you admit that the human rights people were hyping the impending.
Well, it depends on the human rights people. Dennis Ross said 100,000 people would have died in Benghazi. That's crazy. I think thousands would have died, and there would have been a massive refugee problem. I think there would have been hundreds of thousands of refugees.
Okay.
Were there other things that I left on the table that you were?
No, it just seems to me that this intervention is discrediting the regime that you wanted to put in place and not supporting it. Bosnia
is a risk.
Bosnia was a positive for it. This is a negative so far.
Yeah, Bosnia was probably easier and more amenable to an air-only intervention. I still think partition could be better than having done nothing. Especially if the rebels could have maintained the gains that they made right after the NATO intervention, then they would be in control of 75% of the oil in Libya. And that's the situation, and maybe we could move back to something closer to that. But anyway, if you have a partition where there's a bunch of oil in rebel territory, then A, you can turn that into in principle, a thriving, successful laboratory of democracy or something. And B, if you had been able to hold on to the to 75% of the oil, if the rebels had, then it would have been, I think, pretty easy to put the squeeze on Gaddafi and eventually get him to relinquish power. But that's my view. It's a very tough call. I don't think this was an easy call at all. I think it was a lot easier than Iraq, but I mean, a much better idea than Iraq.
Before we close it out, why would intervening against Gaddafi send a message to, say, Assad in Syria that he can't crack down viciously against any internal rebellion? Since we're clearly not going to do the same thing in Syria, he must know that. So I don't see where attacking in Libya has any demonstration effect against him at all.
Yeah, I don't think Syria is a case where we would ever intervene. I mean, there aren't many places we would intervene. On the other hand, there are places nominally allies like Bahrain, where in principle, or Yemen, where we are actually allied with them. and our having intervened with against Gaddafi, if nothing else, makes it harder for us to stand behind dictators who are killing people. In principle, may not work out that way. For now, the momentum, of the whole Arab revolt seems to have slowed considerably, so this may not help. And this has certainly not been as wildly successful as I had hoped. But that's life.
Yeah. Okay. I just wanted to give you grief for your hopes being dashed.
Well, I feel full of grief, so you've succeeded. That was good.
Okay.
Now so we want to talk domestic politics.
Yeah, we have three topics. One is the budget deal that was just concluded on the continuing resolution that allegedly cut $38.5 billion in spending. Second, the impending much larger budget deal where Obama just gave a speech claiming he's going to cut $4 trillion from the deficit over, I think, 10 years, maybe a little more than 10 years. And third, what sort of people focus in on as the real way to curb the deficit, which is some form of medical rationing, in my retrograde anti-rationing views. Which you want to give me grief for.
Can I give you some grief on those?
Go ahead if you want.
Well, so my first thought, the argument I had anticipated maybe having with you, or with some conservative, if not you, was to make the point that Ryan's plan is the rough equivalent of death panels, right? A cutback in care, a kind of a reduction in the allocation of resources that somewhere will lead to somebody's death. That in other words, it's rationing, and
that's why I oppose it, and I think Obama should oppose it.
I should have known that you, above all, would sense immediately that it was rationing, and devote your energy to opposing it on those grounds.
But the problem is that Ryan and Obama are on the same side. They both believe in rationing.
Right. Every reasonable person believes that you're going to have to reduce the outlay of health resources, government-provided health resources for the elderly, except for you.
Well, why? If you look at the charts, they go up and they stop at around, 30, 40% of GDP. That's only 30, 40% of GDP. It's not undoable.
So you think we should spend 40% of GDP on health care for the elderly?
Well, on health care. Not on health.
What?
On health care. There's no more benign use of our resources than finding new technologies to keep people alive. There
isn't?
I don't think so.
Depends on the people.
It's more benign than coming up with new ways to get rock and roll through your headphones.
I'm for that. I ran into Greg Easterbrook in Washington, and he gave me one of these factoids that I can't believe is true, but I think something like it is probably true. You tell me if this is true. I think this factoid is the indictment of your worldview. He said half of the healthcare expenditures for the average American, of all the healthcare expenditures over their lifetime, come in the final 4 months of their life. Now, I can't believe that's quite true. Can you?
I sort of believe it's quite true, but it's very deceptive. That implies that all the expenses are keeping people alive on heart lung machines after they're already gone. No. You're living, you're perfectly healthy, then something happens to you, and you die. Of course, the great expense is going to be when something happens to you. You get run over by a truck, you're going to get a lot of medical expenses. That doesn't mean that we can cut down on those medical expenses by rationing. It just means that people are healthy until they get sick, and it's when they get sick that they call the doctor. Duh.
Yeah, but don't you think it's kind of crazy? Given that there are, poor people who actually die, and even not so poor people, actually die from inadequate medical care when they're, 25, and would otherwise live another 50 years. Given that, don't you think there's something crazy about spending half of our healthcare resources in the final 4 months of people's lives?
I don't.
I mean, whatever the real number is, and maybe that is the real number.
But so we kill them before they get run over by a truck? I don't understand how you save all that money. And I also don't think there are a lot of 25-year-olds dying for lack of care. I think the bigger the healthcare system, the fewer poor people will die for lack of adequate care, and the better the system will be. And the more you say yourself, you want to slow down the pace of technological growth. I want a vigorous pace of technological growth. That will do more for the 25-year-old poor people.
I want vigorous technological growth. I just want better like headphones for telephones, better headsets.
Okay.
If you just pardon this, I'll get back to this, but like, why is it that nobody can create a headset for a landline telephone that will let you pump up the volume as high as you want? Like in Spinal Tap, where they say this one goes to 11? You know?
I'm sure they do, Bob, but it probably just costs $1,000.
No, it shouldn't cost anything. It's the easiest thing in the world, but I'm starting to sound like Andy Rooney, so let me get back to what I was saying.
Water's under that bridge.
In two senses. First of all, the only reason I'm so sensitive to the hearing problem, of course, is because I'm, elderly, and then also I'm sounding like Andy Rooney. So, no, but what this gets to, what this healthcare thing gets to, is my monthly opportunity to point out that you're not a true liberal. Because the thing that should really...
I'm not a true liberal because I defend Medicare?
Because of this. Ryan comes out with his plan, okay? Now, to a liberal, the truly indefensible thing about the plan is Medicaid. Coverage for his cutting health coverage for poor people. In effect, that's what's going to happen down the road in the course of this, and that's the whole goal of it. Any true liberal focuses on that, the truly needy, before they start worrying about, middle class and affluent people in their final 4 weeks not getting the reimbursement that Mickey might like. Right? But you in your blog did you even mention? Did you complain at all about what he does to poor people in the Ryan plan?
Bob, Medicare covers rich and poor alike. You know that.
Rich and poor alike, a very small percentage of whom are poor.
It's anybody over 65, and that's one of its virtues, is that it treats everybody the same, and rich and poor people both get high-quality care. Medicare gives poor people crappy care, and it's going to get crappier under Ryan's plan. Did you even mention that in your blogging about the Ryan plan, Mickey? Medicare is a doomed crappy program that eventually needs to be subsumed into a better program.
You mean Medicaid?
Medicaid, of universal care. And then there's the whole workers' comp system, which is also
You are so totally
insane,
trying to evade the question, Mickey. You're totally trying to evade the question. Ryan didn't want to scrap Medicaid and replace it with something better. He just wants it to shrink and shrink and shrink, so the poor people have worse and worse health care, and we spend less and less on it. You didn't mention that in your blogging. Well, instead, you focused on how will this affect Mickey in the final month of his life.
Well, it's a question of how does this affect the system that I eventually want everybody to think everybody should probably merge into through a public option. Maybe that can be avoided. And destroying if we have one program that is the good system, and there are all these crappy systems, and we want to eventually bring everybody into the good system, the worst sin is that Ryan destroys the good system, not that he takes these crappy programs and makes them even crappier. I trust the Democrats will be able to defend that. And you're
in favor of making crappy programs crappier.
No, I'm not
for the
in favor of it. I focused on. I happen to focus on the one thing that seemed more important, which is destroying the good system. And you're doing the classic liberal thing, which is why didn't Mickey mention this, this, and this, and this, which is really tedious, Bob.
I
agree. I oppose Ryan's plan on those things. The killer, the fatal silver bullet that will kill Ryan's plan is that he wants to destroy Medicare, not that he wants to chisel away at the already crappy Medicaid program.
Well, right. I mean, that's the thing. As a political matter, it's the Medicare that's going to get him into trouble. That's why the last thing we need is you jumping on the pile of the politically inevitable.
No, we do need to be jumping on the pile because Obama...
The whole point of a true liberal would be...
At the time, it's still not clear that Obama is going to jump on the pile. Obama gave this speech today, and he did sort of draw a line on Medicare, but not really. He mainly drew a line on He tried to draw a line on tax cuts for the rich. But he's sort of namby-pamby on drawing the line on Medicare because he believes in rationing. He doesn't believe in the promise of Medicare.
Well, not only that, you're almost missing the key thing from your point of view, the thing I think you'd be dwelling on. He didn't just not draw the line on rationing, he upped the ante, right?
Well, he said that this all-powerful independent payments board is going to save us. And if it doesn't save us, we should give them even more anti-democratic power. But I don't think... Do they have the power to ration right now? I mean, technically, there's...
Yes. Under Obamacare, my understanding is that this board in the executive branch will have the following power. If Congress fails to hold the growth in Medicare spending to GDP plus... it was 1%, and now I think in this speech, according to Ezra Klein's summary of the Obama plan, it's going to be cut to GDP plus half of 1%. In other words, in your terms, tightening up the rationing, which is, I think, a fair description of it.
Well, that's not how they describe it.
And this, so if Congress fails to do that, this executive board has to, as I understand it, amend the reimbursement rates for various procedures such that the spending will come into line, and if Congress fails to come up with an alternative way to do it, whatever this executive board came up with becomes law. That's my understanding.
But there are two issues here, and I'm ignorant of what the answer is. Does this board have the power to deny treatments on the basis that while they are effective, they are not worth the cost? That depends very much on how the statutory language is written, and it may be written quite vaguely, but that's going to be the lawsuit to end all lawsuits when they try to say this treatment is effective, but it's really not worth the money. I'm
not sure they have to say. I'm not sure they have to say it all, but go ahead.
I mean, they can just bullshit and say, well,
we had to cut something according to the law. This is what we're cutting. It's the least bang per buck. It's what we're cutting.
Can they decide that certain individuals don't merit those treatments because they're too old?
What they will claim, probably, if they have to claim anything, is that doctors should be able to do this procedure for X amount, and that's why they're lowering the reimbursement rate.
Well, that's different.
And insurance companies do that all the time, and it's a lie. I mean, that's why, I have Blue Cross and Blue Shield. It's great, except that there's not a doctor in the world that accepts it, as far as I can tell.
Berwick, the head of Medicare, who presumably, I assume, heads this advisory board, maybe he doesn't, maybe he just picks people for it or something, has promised the American people, if it helps, everything that helps will be paid for. So that would seem to rule out saying this helps but not enough. So my point is that he
just said that. That was just like a stupid thing to say. That's not in the law, I don't think.
So the fact that the head of Medicare in his first public announcement has to reassure the public that he won't do what you say they will do, that doesn't present any problems for the future of the program, which gets to the second problem, which is I don't think this Congress can bind future Congresses. If a future Congress wants to say, screw this independent advisory board, we don't have to come up with the savings, we're just going to pass a law saying everything it says is null and void, that's a constitutional law if they can get the president to sign it.
Yeah. Well, now you've gotten back to the folly of the whole Ryan plan, right? Which is in terms of Congress binding future Congress. This is the courageous Ryan plan. Says the way we're going to confront the senior citizens lobby is do something that will have no negative impact on anybody who's in their mid-50s now or older. But a decade from now, we're going to start doing something. Well, why do people even take that seriously, right? I mean, why isn't Congress just going to roll that back under the same pressure that keeps them from doing anything in the first place?
I guess the argument is that once you have the momentum for this new system in place, and if it doesn't get killed in the first 5 years, Congress isn't all of a sudden going to say, I guess they could. I mean, I guess that is a problem. Congress isn't going to suddenly say, okay, you're 54 years old, now you're 65, and we're going to let you into Medicare, ordinary Medicare and not the Ryan plan. I guess they could do that. But it's very, very likely that, some person 75 years old will want some drug or some treatment and Medicare will deny it, and Congress will say, sorry, independent board, we want to give it to you. And I don't think there's anything that could stop them. And the power of the sob story will be on the side of the patient at that point, and Obama will probably not be in office, and they will get somebody to sign off on that, and there's the end of the main driver of budget savings in Obama's plan, which is we're going to have this board that's going to be like the Fed, and we're going to give it all the power. We're just going to stand back and let them cut. I don't think that's going to happen. These are people's lives. Congress isn't going to be able to stand back and let them cut. So they're both flawed.
Well, but the Ryan plan is equally doomed by that dynamic.
No, it's okay. So
it's
they're
not
both
more
doomed.
so.
That's fine. I'm not for the Ryan
It's
plan.
fine with you. It's fine with you. Now, so where do we make the money? Maybe, Mickey, one thing we agree on, you tell me, is I say tax the rich.
I say,
and one thing I liked about the Obama speech, we didn't see enough tax the rich oomph in it, but
there was some. He wants to both.
He wants the Bush tax cuts on the rich to end at the end of 2012.
And he's going to phase out their itemized deductions.
And he's going to cap itemized deductions for rich people and phase out the Bush tax cuts.
So those are two cuts on the rich, and that's not the end of the world. That's fine. But the big way to balance the budget.
It's not fine enough. I mean,
my solution is
cut
the Social Security benefits of the rich. So don't do what the left says, which is say that Social Security is only slightly out of balance, and if we just make some adjustments, it'll be in balance and it won't be contributing to the deficit. All that's true, but we don't want Social Security to be in balance. We want to milk Social Security like a cash cow to fund health care. So that means dramatically cutting Social Security benefits for, let's say, the richest half of the population. So Social Security becomes a program in which workers are guaranteed against poverty in their old age.
Well, if you're willing to means test Social Security, are you willing to means test Medicare?
There's a big savings there, too. And people say, we have to ration. No, let's try means testing it first. There are a whole bunch of things. Mm-hmm. There's a contradiction in the respectable position. One month they say, end-of-life care isn't that important. It's 8th on our list. And the other thing is to say, we have to ration end-of-life care. Well, if it's 8th on your list, let's do the first 7. And let's means test, and let's means test Social Security, and then maybe we can find that we can afford a system like the current Medicare system, which doesn't really ration, and people like the fact that it doesn't make those life-death decisions. But for some reason, the sexiest thing is to say, hey, let's have death panels, let's pull the plug on Granny, and people just talk about that, even though it's not the main construct.
That is sexy. Yeah, say that again. That's really sexy. Pull the plug on Granny. That's obvious appeal.
I think actually caricatures it too.
Yeah. No, I think we shouldn't argue about this forever, but I think, people realize that the drift of technology is to allow us, if we want, to spend more and more money on, per day on people whose quality of life is less and less, and whose life is closer and closer to being over. And there are people who ask, is that the optimal way to allocate resources? But we've had this argument.
One day that may come. I don't see any reason to anticipate that day, which might be 40 years off.
No, it's happening right now. That is a trend that's been happening for decades.
But the idea that you could spend $1 million and get $1 million a year and get 20 more years of life for people, or $10 million a year. That technology doesn't exist yet, or else Rupert Murdoch would have signed on to it. There's a movie called something Creature.
Wait, the technology exists to spend huge quantities of money on people in their final days and weeks of life. It happens all the time, even though their lives are miserable and almost over.
But that expense we can handle by having doctors talk to people individually, and some people spend it, some people don't. That expense.
Ooh, that's the other kind of death panel, right?
Well, sure, but it's decentralized. It's not the government deciding, Sarah Palin, you're a retarded baby. Sorry, we can't afford to have it live.
No, but if the government's paying for it, Mickey, the people are never going to go, pull the plug. I want to send some dollars into the Treasury.
It's at a level now where the government can afford it. Maybe someday in the future there'll be these incredibly expensive ways to extend life for long periods of time, and we'll have to. So
you think the deficit? You think the deficit is not at to worrisome levels at all?
No, I think there are other ways to cut the deficit rather than death panels.
Yeah.
And I've said what they are, Bob. I've stepped up to the plate.
Yeah, you have. I mean, you should run for office.
And so anyway.
So, what do you think about the budget deal that Obama did? I mean, the progressive critique is, started out with the Republicans saying $30 billion and Obama saying, no, it has to be less than that, and finally they compromise at $39 billion.
Well, first, yes, Obama does have this tendency to make preemptive concessions, which doesn't seem to work, and I don't understand why he doesn't realize it doesn't work. The second thing is that there weren't $38 billion in cuts. You know, there was an article in the National Journal. In discretionary programs, it boils down to around $14 billion. So there, it wasn't that big a hit. My big objection is that nobody deals with these sort of everybody says we have these boxes of government we're gonna somehow we're gonna cut expenses, but nobody looks what's in the box. And there's a lot of fat in every agency in the government. There is a $1 billion across the board cut that all agencies are going to have to figure out to deal with, but that's only $1 billion. Every agency of the government has an affirmative action officer. Every agency of government, has just things that are not high priority. If the government was in crisis, the head of OPM would not be hiring a deputy speechwriter. I mean, go look at the advertisement for this job, which came out of the Daily Caller. They say, get to work for one of the most dynamic speakers in government, the head of the Office of Personnel Management. We're hiring a deputy speechwriter, probably pays $100,000 a year. Well, if he's so damn dynamic, he can write his own speeches if the government's in crisis. There's all sorts of fat going on every day in Washington that nobody is touching, that Obama isn't touching, the Republicans aren't touching. It's very hard to touch. But it's annoying that gets sort of cemented into the baseline, and then we talk about cutting benefits for old people while keeping the deputy speechwriter.
Yeah, but as you said yourself, it's just very hard to cut. Let me ask you this about Obama. What is your theory about why he continues to disappoint progressives? I mean, it seems to me that the possibilities are, A, he's a wuss. He just doesn't like confrontation, okay? B, he's absorbed in this image of himself as the person who rises above, the great compromiser, neither red nor blue. And C, he just doesn't understand negotiation. What do you think the most likely answer is?
He thinks he achieves more by this sort of rope-a-dope style, and he's achieved a lot, Bob. He passed a national health care bill. Nobody else has been able. Nobody else has been able to do that, and he also actually sort of disagrees with a lot of left chibolas. He thinks he doesn't believe he thinks Medicare is unsustainable. He doesn't really want to defend Medicare, so he's unlikely to draw a cynical line in the sense.
But the budget concessions weren't about Medicare. They were about.
But they weren't such a big deal, Bob. What's such a horrible cut that got made? High-speed rail? Do you care about that? No, I don't care about that much.
Well, but some of the there were political concessions that weren't so much about money, like the abortions in D.C. thing that got him in hot water with people.
But even that, is that terrible? I mean, D.C.'s...
Well, he felt he had to throw it in. Why do you have to throw it in?
Well, if it's not that terrible, you throw it in and you preserve an important program, that's a good deal for him.
No, but why buy himself the trouble politically of annoying progressives?
I think he can safely annoy the District of Columbia. I think they're going to vote for him anyway.
Actually, I'm not so sure. That's no longer apparently a majority black city. His base may be. He may want to think twice. But anyway,
it's still a Democratic.
I think it's I think it's a combination of his self-image as a great compromiser, and I don't know. I think maybe he doesn't get negotiating. Because the key to negotiating, one key, is to convince the other side that your behavior is constrained. The famous example in game theory, and Thomas Schelling's example, is you're playing a game of chicken, you're driving a car directly toward the other person. If you can rip out your own steering wheel and throw it out the window in full view of the other driver, you'll win because he knows you don't have the option to swerve, you just can't. Now for the Republicans, that is built into the current political logic. It's the Tea Party. Boehner can point to the Tea Party and say, my hands are tied. I can't, I just can't move any farther to the left.
If you read Dave Weigel and Josh Green, they pointed out that it wasn't really the Tea Partiers who were causing trouble, and it wasn't the freshmen. They basically fell in line. It was traditional Republican social conservatives who were not necessarily Tea Partiers like Mike Pence.
But do you think Boehner uses the Tea Party?
He uses either one. I just think it's unfair to say it's those crazy Tea Partiers.
Okay, but I mean, it seems to be working as a negotiating strategy. I mean, anybody to his right will do, in a way, if they're sufficiently ferocious, and Obama could, in principle, point to people to his left and say, look, they just won't let me do this. But the other thing Obama could do, the other famous thing to do in negotiating, is publicly declare a firm position so unequivocally that it's just going to be pretty much impossible for you to back down.
Right. He hasn't done that with Medicare, and although let's go over the speech again, but I just listened to the speech, and that message did not come across.
Here's what I would have liked to see him do in the speech that he just gave in that regard, is just say, I absolutely will not sign any deal where spending cuts are not matched dollar for dollar by tax revenues from the rich.
Why? What?
I mean, because we should do that. I mean, the plan he outlined is a 2-to-1 spending cuts to tax increases for the rich. Yeah, 3-to-1. It's something bad. I mean, it's not enough.
Why not wring out all?
Well, Mickey, you're the one who doesn't want to ration. You're the one who doesn't.
Wring out all the spending cuts you can now. Use the crisis to get the government down. Only have a few tax cuts, tax increases. We can always raise taxes on the rich later when we discover we need more government. We don't want to use it all up now to finance wasteful government programs. I don't want to.
Look, spending cuts and tax increases are kind of equally hard to do. You can't say that one of them is going to be easy to do later. No, you have to use the crisis to do whichever one you want to do.
Spending cuts are much, much harder than tax increases. Nobody's been able to cut spending. We're now at a crisis where we might actually be able to make some dent in it. Tax increases are the easy way out. Many presidents have increased taxes. No president has successfully cut the blow to
Washington. Look, Mickey, you're the one who's complaining about the way both Ryan and Obama want to do the spending cuts, okay? You cannot abide the thought of any reduction in Medicare benefits, okay? Fine. Wouldn't you rather see higher tax hikes on the rich?
Yes, but first I would rather do the really hard thing, which is A, try to cut the marbled fat in the Washington bureaucracy, and B, try to means test some of these very expensive
But that's
programs.
harder. That's probably harder than any of this stuff.
That's right. You just said they were equally hard, and I'm saying it's harder, so we should do it first before we do the easy thing.
Well, no, those kinds of spending cuts are the hardest.
Yes. So do them.
Okay, well, why do you think they can be done?
Well, because you have to use the current crisis to do them. If you just say, oh, well, we can tax, Also, they're necessary. It's offensive. It's offensive that you cut benefits for old people in order to fund the deputy speechwriter for the head of OPM. I'm sorry. Why can't Obama say, I'm sorry, agency heads, you're going to have to put up with less. You're not going to be able to build your own little fiefdoms. And I've appointed, appoint Kenneth Feinberg, the only man who can make the government work, to supervise.
Do you at least agree? Do you at least agree that Ryan's plan in the long run hits Medicare harder than Obama's plan?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So you favor Obama's plan compared to Ryan's?
Well, sure, because I don't think this all-powerful independent payment advisory board is going to be able to get away with much.
Well, but suppose it could. And suppose we were going to really do one plan or the other. What's your fave?
I would still pick Obama's.
There you go. See, I'm helping you get your liberal credentials back. Congratulations.
I don't think that'll do it.
So we're running toward the end of our allotted time. We're going to talk about some non-boring stuff.
Okay, but it's.
What was that again?
We're going to talk about the New York Times paywall, which.
Yeah, I don't have any. I mean, why? What's your line on that?
I just hit it yesterday, and I put something up on Twitter saying I hit it, but there are all these tricks to get around it, and I'm very bad at tricks. But I was amazed to see that if you switch browsers, so if you're looking on Internet Explorer, if you switch to Chrome, you got another 20 articles, and if you and the guy for the New York Times, sent a Twitter saying, "Knock yourself out, guys. We purposely, we don't care." The theory behind the New York Times paywall is if you pay, we'll take your money. If you evade it, we'll take your eyeballs. And we're happy either way. Go knock yourself out trying to get around this paywall. It's purposely porous. And that's sort of an interesting strategy. I guess I was trying to figure out why the strategy might not work. There might not be enough people who pay that you make up for the eyeballs you lose by forcing people into all these evasive maneuvers. So while it seems like a brilliant win-win strategy, it might be a disastrous lose-lose strategy if the various elasticities of how many people drop off and how many people pay don't work out the way the Times hopes they'll work out.
Right. It's kind of like what do economists call this kind of pricing, where you're selling the same.
Right.
The key is to distinguish between like business travelers who can afford anything and not.
There's some segment and there's some word. Yes.
Yes, and when the word arrives, we will post it. But yeah, you could view it that way. I mean, there was some company that tracks internet traffic which claims that their traffic is significantly down.
If I can find that blog post. Well, it's 15%, so that it seems to be they're happy with a 15% hit. They're not happy with a. Well,
no, but the study I saw was like visitors is down like that much, but page views more. So in other words, it's the non-casual visitors who were deserting them, according to this. But I don't see, when I look at things, like Alexa and so on, I don't see any obvious drop.
Well, the killer for them is if the writers feel they're not being read. So if Maureen Dowd feels you've cut her audience the way all the New York Times writers apparently felt with their ill-considered Time Select experiment, that will kill it, because the Times needs to have happy writers.
Yeah.
The revenue thing is another thing that'll kill it. Anyway, they're very smug and happy about this thing now, and I'm just not sure it's justified.
And you wanted to talk about this nutty lawsuit?
Well, I think it's a nutty lawsuit also by this guy Jonathan Ticini, who is a huge menace, who's the guy who sued the Times and won over whether the Times had the contractual right to post electronically articles that had been written for it in the past without going back to all the authors and getting their permission. And of course, he was right contractually, but the net result was that everybody, all authors, articles like mine, all disappeared from Nexus. So thank you, Jonathan Ticini. He also ran for Senate against Hillary Clinton and did much better than I did. He got like.
Hard to imagine.
20, screw you. He got like 20% of the vote, which was impressive. Anyway, he's a huge pest, and he's now sued Arianna Huffington on the grounds that, well, you can't make a living posting things that bloggers write for free, which is sort of insane, as Matthew Iglesias pointed out. Arianna could charge people. That's a valid business model. We charge you to give you access to our readers, and so. Doing it for free, he's cutting the writers a break.
Well, but moreover, look, he wrote the stuff fully understanding he wasn't going to get paid for it, and now he's suing because he didn't get a piece of the action when they sold the Huffington Post?
That's crazy. There's unfortunately some legal precedent of some company that used volunteer labor, and of course, that violates all the Fair Labor Standards laws. So there is a sort of, he's hit on a sort of a conceptual lacuna in capitalism, which is, what if people are going to work for you for free? How doesn't that violate the Fair Labor Standards Act? And it does, but is it then work? I mean, so.
Well, yeah, I mean, look, does this include commenters on the Huffington Post? They give her content for free that generates page views.
Right,
this
what
is
about
crazy.
Twitter? I agree. Okay, we agree he's crazy.
You know why I fear this, is because, when I sell Bloggingheads for tens of millions, I don't want, people like you showing up at my door.
You're buying yourself a big lawsuit, Bob.
Yeah, I'm concerned about that.
Well, I gotta seize your Honda.
The Honda's dead, man. 1985 Honda died 2 years ago.
And you also want to talk about Donald Trump, because
Oh, I don't know. He seems like a click-getter. You know,
Trump
what do
is
you
the
think?
new Palin.
Trump is the new Palin, except possibly stupider.
It's nice that it's a non-sex. I mean, you used to think, well, Palin just gets hits because she's a babe. No, Trump gets hits, and he's an unattractive man. So there you go. The key point about Trump is he has said he would run as an independent candidate, maybe. Okay? So he has tremendous leverage. Even if he's a joke, which he is, he could be Ross Perot and kill Republicans. Because unlike Perot, his appeal does not stretch that much to the left, although he has surprising support among blacks. But if he ran, he would steal votes mainly from the Republican candidates, tip a couple of states to the Democrats by splitting the Republican vote, and kill the GOP's chances and reelect Obama. So he has just tremendous sort of, I'm going to bring the House down leverage. And he has the ego and the money to do it.
I'm in favor of the scenario you just outlined.
He says, I'm Obama's worst nightmare. No, he's the Republican worst nightmare.
Absolutely. Now, do you think he believes the birther stuff?
No. But...
You don't?
No, I think he's brilliantly and cynically using it.
I don't know. He just can't be too brilliant and say as many stupid things as he says. Did you read the letter he wrote into the New York Times after
the Gail Collins? No.
It's just kind of, you know, humorous in how badly written it is. I mean, I suppose you could accuse the Times of not doing the kind of cleaning up, the kind of copy edit cleaning up that they may do for some letters to the editor, but
that's entirely possible. The key question in the birther stuff is Obama purposely not releasing his birth certificate to stoke birther?
No, he did release his birth certificate. Well, the certificate, you know, certificate of live birth, one of the many. It's just what I think it's just what birth certificates are called in a lot of states. Let me show you something. I was just curious, and.
But why not release the long form too? What's the downside? The downside is that then these crazy birthers would go away.
Mickey, I remember that I had to get a copy of my birth certificate a couple decades ago, and I went and saw Trump's making this big deal. It's not a birth certificate; it's a certificate of live birth. So I'd sent off to the state of Oklahoma. Please send me my birth certificate. I got it. Here it is. It says certificate of live birth. That's what they say.
But everybody agrees there is this other form. He's president of the United States. He could arrange that form became public. That is the sort of
so you think maybe he's hiding something. So you think maybe he's hiding something.
No, I think he was born in there were contemporaneous accounts in newspapers. I think he was born in Hawaii. I think he's eligible to be president.
Well, then what do you think's going on?
He is purposely. I mean, that's the big mystery, Bob. There could be mysteries in life. One obvious answer to the mystery is he's perfectly happy to have these crazy birthers running around because he can use them as a foil. And yes, Donald Trump is using it to destroy the Republican Party. It's all working out for him.
Are you sure? I think that's crazy. He'd like to put it into the rumors. Are you sure that in Hawaii there is a longer form?
There is part of the evidence against the birthers is that there is somebody who said he has seen the longer form.
Because this thing, it's Oklahoma, but it's like an original. It's not a copy, and it says use this form for live births occurring on or after whatever.
Well,
but anyway,
Bob, that's probably a longer form. I'm beginning to have doubts about you. That would explain your internationalist worldview.
Yeah, that would explain it. But I was so disappointed in CNN did this interview with Trump that was supposed to be a kind of an ambush. You could tell. Yeah. And Candy Crowley had all these. She was ready, but she wasn't ready enough. It's like. She had the thing there. The newspaper had the announcement of his birth, 2 separate newspapers. And Trump does this thing where he says, but wait a second, isn't it a little weird that the birth announcement appears 8 days after the birth? Okay? And if you look at the document, she was holding, if you actually look at the version on the internet, there were 24 birth announcements in that issue of the newspaper. Most of them were as old as Obama's or older.
That's a good point.
Yeah. All you got to do is count. 13 of 24 are either on August 4th or even earlier, you know. It's the Sunday edition of the paper, the August 13th edition. They clearly did these on a weekly basis. They probably put them to bed on Wednesday, you know, this section of the paper.
Yeah.
I mean, never mind.
No, well, anyway, CNN's doing the Democrats' bidding. It's in everybody's interest to keep Trump alive.
No, I don't think that. They wanted to kill Trump. They just didn't have their. And she didn't do a bad job, but.
I think it's no coincidence that they screwed this up, Bob. Okay.
So Mickey, I got to show off this amazing new Bloggingheads functionality. Okay, you're gonna have to bear with me here.
You.
Okay. Now, let me hope. I mean, they say, you know what they say about demos. You know what they say about demos?
They always screw up.
Never, ever, whatever you do, rely on the internet to be working, to your you know, actual live connection to be working during a demo. But I'm going to take the risk. Okay, so here's the deal. This is like share functionality, okay? We want to make it easier for viewers to share our content, which we think they would like to do. So we've added something to the share thing, and I want to, in the course of this, kind of review the I think fairly impressive share functionality we already had. Okay, now you can't see this, but you will be amazed when you see the way this works, because I don't know, you may be familiar with it. Okay, so you go to like this dialogue, our last dialogue. It was longer ago than I wish it were. So let's see if it actually plays, okay?
Hi, Mickey. Hey, Bob. How are you?
I'm okay. How are you doing?
Not so good. I'm sick. I have a toothache.
It's playing.
I was reading.
Okay. So, first of all, did you hear that? Could you hear that, Mickey?
Vaguely.
Good. Now, we've long had this share button in one form or another, okay, to allow you to, suppose you wanted to share the whole dialogue. Now, first of all, let me say that what's new here, okay, is the F and the T. You can go straight to Facebook or Twitter with it. I'll get back to that, but first I want to show you some, I think, impressive things about it that predated this. I mean, it's long been the case that you could either click here, copy the URL into an email, or copy the code to embed it, okay? Now, suppose that you didn't want to share a whole dialogue of Mickey whining as you were starting to whine there, but just wanted to stop it right after the preliminary whining, you know? So first of all, you can see here that right now the whole dialogue would be shared, all of it. I think you can see that. If you click this thing, then that thing snaps over. Now you're defining a much narrower clip, right? Just the 10 seconds. And you can share that. You can go straight to Facebook, blah, blah, blah. And you can refine it. First, you can play it and go,
Hey, Bob, how are you?
I'm okay. How are you doing?
Not so good. I'm sick. I have a toothache. You know, I was reading.
And if you want, you can say, wait, let's cut out that whining part, and you can fine-tune it further up here if you want, okay? And say, let's cut it down to 5 seconds.
Hey, Bob, how are you?
I'm okay. How are you doing? And say, that's all I want. Whatever. You can define any clip you want. Amazing. You can copy the URL, embed code. What's new, again, is you can go straight to Facebook or Twitter with whatever you've defined. So if you click the Facebook thing, you get the standard Facebook template. And by the way, and so if you go with this, you know, fill in the thing up here and go with it, then you'll just get whatever clip you've defined. We'll go on Facebook. And a little known fact is this thing here, which is the title of the dialogue, looks like something you would click on. It would take you somewhere wrong. You click on it, you can actually change it. You can change it to anything you want. So that gives you, you know, all kinds of creative opportunities.
I'll try that.
Okay. So the point
What
is...
happens in Twitter? Same thing?
Same thing with Twitter, roughly speaking. And And this will just give our viewers almost unlimited creative opportunities in terms of, finding the thing that somebody has said that they want to ridicule or champion or whatever, or find something that is a source of, mirth or something.
Great. There's no anti...
We're proud of this. And Brenda and Ramon. Ramon is our exploited outsource worker somewhere across the Atlantic. Brenda is our exploited American citizen
Across
worker.
the Atlantic where?
I think he's in Spain.
Okay.
I don't know. They can be anywhere these days.
But,
anyway, they've done good work, and really, we think viewers should spread the word about us.
there's no anti-whining button yet, though.
Well, there's the equivalent. You saw the way I got rid of the whining.
I heard you getting rid of the whining.
Yeah.
But you only got rid of my whining.
Well, that's because there was no whining by me, and that's commonly the case.
But you're just a crusty curmudgeon. I'd like to get rid of that, too.
Yeah, I guess you could call the Andy Rooney part of me whining, couldn't you?
Well, that sounds great. Which do you think is more important, Facebook or Twitter? I think Twitter is important. Other people, like Nick Denton, who knows more than I do, claim that Facebook is the only thing that matters.
Well, people generally tell you they get more traffic from via Facebook than Twitter. We actually get about the same. I think that's because, I would say, I guess, Twitter, for people who are on the site, showing up on the site, the blogging heads themselves, the diabloggers, Twitter is more relevant because these are people with Twitter followings, and maybe we get some traffic from them tweeting this stuff. For the average viewer, probably Facebook is a more relevant tool. I also think Facebook is a better place to kind of watch video. I mean, right, when you're reading your Twitter feed, you're not right. You're not especially thinking of it as a way to get to video. Whereas with Facebook, the video thing just expands right there, and you watch it on Facebook.
True. Good point.
These are my thoughts.
Great. Well, I look forward to using this.
I hope that demo was intelligible. I hope people could see what was going on.
We can always redo it again and stick it on the end of this.
I could do that. Okay, so we're gonna be back within weeks,
yes,
right?
Since this one was late a week, I think we should have the next one in like 3 weeks or something.
Yes, I agree.
Although, I think I probably in the 5-week hiatus, people have completely lost interest in us. But
there's some evidence that happened a long time ago, actually. But let's take that offline. All right.
See you later.
See ya. Bye.